Craig Smith. Howard Solomon.
Here.
Everybody can stand for the pledge of
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get started today, we have our Director of Human Resources with us, who started June 26th. So Sarah Abadi. July 26th. So this is what, day 5?
Still here.
Next, we have public participation and recognition, acceptance of gifts and donations. This is an action item that the Board of Education accept with gratitude the donation of 12 iMacs, 9 Dell laptops, 2 network switches, and 1 printer with an estimated value of $4,200 from American Marketing and Publishing of DeKalb.
Second.
Okay, roll call please.
Ray Davis.
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht.
Yes.
Carrie Malat.
Yes.
Victoria Newport.
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez.
Yes.
Howard Solomon.
Yes.
Is there someone here from? Thank you so much to them for the record.
Very generous.
Very generous.
Next, we have public comment. Members of the public who wish to speak to the board should complete a request card prior to the meeting. This section of the meeting will be reserved for comments from the public. All comments should be limited to 3 minutes. Criticism of individuals is not important. All right, next, we have board committee reports and correspondence. Okay. Just so everybody knows, we are having a board retreat next Tuesday, August 8th. And we are working with Diana Robinson out of NIU to help facilitate the conversation. We are going to work on putting together some priorities, looking at our board goals, just kind of getting the new board together. So that's happening next week. And everybody has a little homework board to complete prior to Friday. Send them to the information to Diana when you get it done. Mr. Holgren. All right, anything else? Okay. Next, we have presentations. Aries Consulting, lead in the water testing, and this is Tammy Tarson, and it's a informational item.
I'd like to also introduce Jeff Blatchy. Jeff is from Aries Consulting and is our resident expert from the company that's going to be assisting us with the lead in the water testing that will be starting after the school year. So if you recall back a couple of months ago, I was in front of the board and the board approved Aries as our company that will be doing our lead in the water testing that's required by the end of this calendar year. At the majority of our schools, we've opted to do all of our required testing plus some additional prior to the start of this, or I'm sorry, before the end of the school year. And I said I would bring him back in to be answer any questions that you might all have, as well as talk about how we're going to handle it if test results come in at certain levels, to get feedback from the board tonight in regards to at what level that comfort is in regards to potential retesting, remediation, whatever we might consider needing to be done. So Jeff actually has put together this presentation. We'll go over some things briefly and get some background. So.
I put together a couple slides. Some of it's background. We'll go through that very quickly. I think most of you are probably familiar just from watching the news of kind of what's driving this and the approval of the law. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me. We'll go through what the law requires us to sample, what we're planning on sampling for District 428, and then we want to talk about what's required for reporting and mitigation. In terms of mitigation, there's really not much. There's nothing required for what we want to do and what makes sense for us to do. So if we look at the history, we're all aware of Flint, Michigan, and then shortly after that, the city of Chicago decided to test their schools, and they had numerous issues as well. Just kind of a reference. when the city of Chicago, when they were seeing their concentrations, they were up 3,200 parts per billion. In all of the outlying suburbs, we've done a lot of testing now. We've never seen anything that high, but it's just to kind of give you an idea. You know, we might see 100, might even see a 300 sometimes. You know, that seems real high when everything else is non-detect or 5 or 15, but just to kind of give you an order of magnitude. The sources of lead in drinking water, I think it's important to understand that it's not, municipalities are not supplying lead in drinking water. In pretty much every case that I'm aware of, they're not, the lead's not coming from the potable well, it's not coming from the water supply. In Flint, what happened was they didn't control the pH, and when you don't control the pH, lead can leach out of the piping systems, especially old piping systems. In Flint, they had a lot of old infrastructure. In Chicago, again, the Chicago Public Schools has a lot of old infrastructure. You can get lead in the water incoming to the building if there's, you know, it's not very, it's rare, but it can happen if there was a construction project on the water mains. You've got knocked loose. You know, that can also happen if you have to, especially if you have older piping and there's construction in the building. So we want to be aware of that when we're scheduling our testing. If there's some kind of construction going on in the area, even if we have to stop and come back and do it again, we don't want to test the school right after there's been any kind of construction in the water main incoming. You can always, you know, a single sample is not very expensive. We can always take an incoming water sample before we test, but there's no exemption. The IEPA does not give us any exemption. It doesn't give us any exemption to not report. We think the source is from somewhere else, so we don't want to do the testing if we think there's anything that's going to lead to unrepresentative results. Then we're required to report it. You know, we're talking about leaching from the plumbing systems. It's when the pH is not controlled. We've done a number of incoming samples. We've really not seen issues in incoming water with pH. In lead in new plumbing and plumbing repairs was banned in 1986. And you'll see when you see the different requirements for when when the testing has to be complete, whether it's this year or next year. The cutoff is 1987. That wasn't just with the Baker ran. It has to do with when the lead in plumbing systems was banned. There is still lead allowed in, there's 0.2% allowed in copper and 8% in lead piping systems. So just because of our piping was installed after 1987 doesn't mean we can't have issues with lead leaching from the piping. Its likelihood is greatly reduced, but can still happen, particularly if the pH is not controlled.
Can I ask a question? I believe that 22% lead in solder and 8% lead in piping systems, that's the material percentage? This is not the PPB in the water.
Correct, that's material percentage.
Material percentage, okay.
You know, again, not very likely in materials installed after 1987 that we're going to have issues as long as, you know, the water quality pH is controlled. And, you know, in the outlying Chicago areas, for the most part, they've done a pretty good job of that. When we look at the health effects, it's a toxic metal, it's harmful to human health. It is particularly harmful to children younger than 6. Frequent hand-to-mouth activity, it absorbs more easily than adults, and it can affect their nervous system when it's under development. That's why we're focusing on schools. That's why the bill is focusing on schools. It's much bigger issue for young children. Also an issue for pregnant women, but right now we thought about the school system. I really include these background slides that I want to talk about this one. There's no known safe level of lead in drinking water, and that's a statement that's referenced a lot, and it's referenced by the IDPH right now. Tammy actually brought to our attention that the IDPH is telling groups that they say they're going to require. I don't believe there's anything wrong with it. They can require it, but they're certainly going to push for mitigation, even below 5 parts per billion. We think that would be excessive, considering the fact that municipalities can right at the 15 parts per billion, but it's important. It makes it a little more challenging. It's important to understand that's out, that there is no known safe level, and that makes it more difficult when we're looking at mitigation and where we mitigate that the fact that's hanging out there. We can't make a statement that says under 5 parts per billion is safe. We can't make a statement that says under 2 parts per billion.
Is there a positive correlation to X PPB causing X number of abnormalities biologically?
I don't believe there's any data out there.
Yeah, so that's a pretty open statement.
It's correct. It's an open statement. What it does is it makes it more difficult for us to say that we know you're safe below this. It makes it more difficult when we're trying to find a reasonable level where we're going to mitigate under. That poses a challenge if people want to challenge.
What's the law? I mean, at this point, did you say it's 15? What did you say? Municipalities have to be under 15?
Municipalities have to be under 15 in 90% of their samples.
Well, then that's got to be.
Well,
I mean, it gets absurd to say that there's 0 when there's 15 that is going to come in under normal circumstances. And of course, you can't say that it's safe, but I mean, you can't get, as you mentioned, a positive correlation. You can't say this is going to be, nobody is going to get affected by lead from this point forward with this water, unless you get down to 0, of course, which seems virtually impossible.
And keep in mind, right, and keep in mind with the municipal water supply level next being that 15 parts per billion, that's what's going into the homes.
Right.
So that is what's going into our schools, that's what's going into our homes, and they do not do any
Well,
action against it.
That's
under
measured at their wellhead, I would imagine, right?
No,
The
that is-
reservoir?
they-
Is that measured at the delivery
That's
point?
at the delivery point.
Okay,
And you'll see,
15.
okay.
you'll see what they
The
do is
action level.
it's not an incredibly scientific approach. There is a protocol for taking the samples, but ultimately they have to sample X amount of locations, and they give the end user a container and say collect a sample. And if you look at all the water quality results, they say, well, if there's any that are over the action limit, it's because it's probably old piping in that house.
So what are we shooting for at a drinking fountain in a school?
Well, the law requires us to report if we're over 5 parts per billion.
Even though they can deliver it at 15?
Correct.
How are we going to clean it?
But it says report.
Report.
Okay.
We have to report it.
All right.
At that point, to follow up with Jeff, wouldn't you think? Because I'm sure some of the new fountains have filtering systems on them anyhow. Couldn't we stop it before it gets that far and maybe put a filtering system like by the main that comes into the building or that's in the building to help filter the water?
I think if we're going to look at filtering systems, we would probably better off looking at end use, looking at a filter that's at the actual water fountain.
Correct. Because I think a lot of new ones come with filters anyway.
They typically have a screen.
Probably a different kind.
Yeah, but
They
is
do,
it,
but keep in mind, the buildings we're testing, the majority of them, with the exception of Portland, and just a few that we would be testing at the high school,
Right.
are in our older
Exactly.
buildings and our older fountains.
Exactly.
So,
Sorry, just for just a second, I'm following up on that. So you have to report it at 5, right?
Correct.
Above 5. What does the report do at that point?
alerts.
Do they then go to, is it delivered? What is the outcome of a report over 5?
The over 5 needs to be sent, direct notification needs to be sent to the parents. Meaning you got to identify the location where it was over 5. We have to include a link to the US EPA guidance. And we put together some recommended notifications that we provide to districts, and typically we try to make it as much like the water quality reports you get from the municipality, saying here's what's required. We're required to report over 5. Here's the over 5. There's a US EPA guidance document that has a recommended action level of 20 parts per billion that we work on. That's what we recommend mitigation, and we include that in the notification. This is and it's a US EPA, so it's a credible source.
Keep in mind,
Which is 20.
Correct.
and we have to report over 5, and we have to mitigate over 5.
There's no requirement in the bill to mitigate. You don't have to mitigate.
Yeah.
At 1,000, you don't have to mitigate.
There's nothing required through that. Now, again, he's presenting the different levels with the EPA, with what the municipalities are, what we're required to report. But that's why I felt it was important to bring all of this to you, because when those test results come in, I think it's important we have already made a decision on what that level needs to be, so we know what our action is going to be at that, whether it's a retest or whether it's to do the mitigation.
Is there any more slides after this one?
There's a few more.
All right, so I don't want to ask a bunch
Yeah.
of questions. If you're
Yeah,
gonna go
let's
here.
keep going on this. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just so everybody's aware, the bill is counting on the notification to drive mitigation, the parents, community to drive mitigation. But there's no requirement for mitigation. They're banking on the fact that if people have issues, that's what's going to drive it.
The problem with that, as I see it, and I won't say too much, but this is a lot like radiation and human health, where probability and the direct correlation and so on is rather nebulous. You can predict how many out of a certain sample will have a problem. You can't predict who it'll be. I mean, there's a lot of wiggle room in this whole thing. Right? So that's why that statement is what it is, right? There's no known safe level because you can't predict who's going to get what. You know, all you can say is that the likelihood is greater above some number of ppb, which apparently is 50
0
or 20.
It's 0.
My understanding is to draw a parallel, we do a lot of industrial hygiene sampling. I'm not an industrial hygienist, but they have documented levels. You know, OSHA, ACGIH have documented levels that they use, and they get those by experimenting on things of that nature. I don't believe anybody's fed lab rats.
Again, I think of course.
Yeah.
So it's more a lack of data and not.
Yeah, the strange thing is, I mean, the Romans knew that they had a problem with lead. I mean, it's been around a long time, is my point.
It limits us from saying concretely we don't have an issue here.
And so in the essence of time, you know, these are
Yeah.
things we already hit on, that the EPA action level is at 2.0. But,
20.
or 20, I'm sorry, 20.0 parts per billion. The municipal action level is 15, and that's in 10% of the sample. So it's not just if one comes in at 15, 10% have to be at 15 or above.
I really need to ask this question right now because it's up there. When you send out a notification to parents saying it's above 5%, can you put this information in the notification saying this 20 is what the EPA requires and 15 is what municipalities require? We're at 5, so and we're at
Absolutely.
7 or we're at 8, so we're below the 15 and we're below the 20 or whatever we are.
Well, they're probably going to read that in the paper tomorrow or the next day anyway.
Well, we don't know what it is. So
Well, they're going to find out.
Don't count on the paper to be here. I'm sure it wasn't your paper.
Stands by
Oh, but
state.
it is.
Hey, wait a minute, it's true.
Okay.
Guess we probably got
We'll keep moving on, and then we can answer your question. This just gives the background of the bill, when it was signed into effect. And it amends 6 different codes and acts, including the school code and the plumbing license law.
And we can, some of this is background, we can skip to, the applicability slide is probably what you guys.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of this on the state website. It's a great article.
Right, and I've
I
shared
read
a
it.
lot of this with you in our previous
Yeah.
meetings. So if we'll jump to this part.
Applicability, it applies to grade schools, so pre-K through 5th grade. Does not apply to, the bill does not apply to middle schools as long as they're 6th grade and above, does not apply to high schools. Constructed prior to January 1st, 2000. Occupied by 10 or more children. I didn't think that applied right here, but there's a, we talked about the deadlines. The testing needs to be complete by the end of this calendar year for any building built prior to 1987, and by the end of next year for buildings between 1987 and 2000.
So we're about to do all the ones that we decided to test, we will have done before this calendar year. We're not going to carry any of them into next year.
The bill requires us to do a first draw sample. The first draw sample needs to be after the outlet has not been used for 8 hours and not more than 18. what they're trying to do is they're trying to get a worst case. They want to get, if it's a water fountain, they want to get when a child comes in first thing in the morning, not once it's been used, any concentrations to dissipate.
Don't do it now when nobody's using it at all during the summer.
Right.
No,
That's why
not.
we'll be waiting till after school starts.
Yeah,
Not. One of the things that I can tell you also is that the testing we did prior to the bill, we can tell you that, it really is a good idea at the beginning of the school year to flush the systems. It's a good idea to go to your water fountains and clean the screens. It's just part of your general maintenance procedure. It requires a second draw sample. A second draw sample is in the US EPA guidance document. The US EPA guidance document says you can take a first and a second draw at the same time, flush sample, or you can take a first draw and come back, do a flush sample if the first draw is showing in. The purpose of the flush sample is to determine if the issue is at the actual outlet, the water fountain, the sink, or if it's in the piping behind it. I can tell you that generally we don't, except where required, we don't see a lot of value in the flush sample. We've never seen an issue at a school identified in the flush samples that was not identified in the first draw sample. You may see an outlet here or there that has a first draw sample that's lower than the second, but we've identified schools where there's issues. It's never been something we've never identified with the first draw sample.
We don't have a waiver exemption, so we can skip over this one. We've already talked somewhat about the notification and reporting. We do have to submit our reports, our results to the IDPH within 7 days, which obviously Aries will be assisting us with getting that done. And then we talked about when they exceed the 5.0 parts per billion, what's required of them.
And the 7 days is important because that's not a lot of time. So, if results do come back that show we need to do something, I think we all want to be proactive and figure out what we're going to do before we notify everyone, so we have some answers. And spend a lot of time, so we kind of want to be prepared. Again, if the samples exceed 5 parts per billion, individual parent notification is required. Individual parent notification means it's got to be a letter or an email directly to the parent. If all the results are below 5 parts per billion, then we can just post it on the website. I would probably recommend if we have to send any out, just to be consistent, so you don't have questions of why this one gets sent out, this one didn't. It needs to include the sample locations that were over 5 parts per billion, and needs to include a link to the US EPA's website on the notification.
Go ahead.
The points we need to test are anywhere where non-bottled water is used for ingestion by children or for food preparation, and any tap in a classroom occupied children or students under grade 1.
That's why we have decided we were going to do all elementary classroom sinks, because we do have classrooms that move around, and you don't have to worry about did a kinder class move into what used to be a 3rd grade class or whatever it is. In addition, we'll be testing the sinks in the satellite kitchens at Clinton or Rosette and Huntley Middle School, since they do food preparation for our elementary schools.
A couple things to know: we're required to test all sources. And I talked to IDPH about this. If you have a combination water fountain and bottle fill, they consider those 2 separate sources for water going out. Even though most of the time the bottle fills are PVC piping, they expect both to be tested. When there's 2 sources that share a drain, like a bottle fill, water fountain bottle fill combo, a sink water fountain combo, those would be examples of the only take 1 second draw sample. I think I mentioned at the last meeting, we didn't include any second draw samples for non-required, sources that are not covered by the bill. Kitchen sinks, nurses' offices are, I don't know if it's kind of a gray area. I would say that anytime the nurse's office is being used to dispense medication or where students are drinking the water, we need to be testing those sinks.
We did include nurses' sinks in our samples for our elementary schools.
Teachers' lounges, break rooms, we typically include those. Again, it's very difficult to tell your teachers and your staff that when we test everything else, but we didn't test the teacher's lounge. It's usually 1 sample, so it's generally something that we include. And then any sink that we know to be used for consumption. Classroom sinks, it's just pre-K and kindergarten. The exception would be if we have a home ec room or a room we know that's being used for consumption, we should be testing it.
Do we have home ec in elementary at all?
The, not required, specifically excluded are bathroom sinks, janitor's closets, those specifically mentioned in the bill is not required. Typically when it's a kitchen hand sink where it's a specific, that's a designated hand sink, but where it's an obvious hand sink, we're not testing those. It's not used for potable water. And again, classrooms first grade and up are not required. And we talked about the sample, we did the first draw, and we did the second draw after we flushed for 30 seconds for the required sources.
So what we've opted for at our last meeting, just to remind, elementary schools, we're doing all of our elementary schools. Our water fountains, our sinks in all elementary classrooms, food prep areas, special ed classrooms, and that would be the first draw and flush sample. We're also doing the middle school kitchens, that satellite out, and then the ELDC wing of Huntley Middle School. And if there are any sinks or drinking fountains identified in there that they use beyond the ELDC wing, we will also test those at the Huntley Middle School.
In addition to the required sampling, we're also scheduled to test Cortland, which was
An additional elementary.
right. Additional elementary was built in 2009. The elementary classroom sinks again, so that if there's any moving around the classrooms, you don't have an issue. And the high school Alpha Biddy. One of the things I think we should do, I talked to anyone about, is the middle school water fountains. Again, if parents are concerned, it's hard to say that we tested all the elementary schools, we didn't test the middle schools.
We're talking about an additional 17 sources, and because of the age of those buildings, that's where Jeff's recommendation is coming from, is to do the middle schools because of the age of those buildings. The high school being the 2011 construction, we're not seeing a concern of needing to do the drinking fountains there necessarily.
It said after 2001 was not to be tested, or doesn't need to be tested.
Not required by the bill. It's strictly.
But we're going to do it anyway.
Yes.
So that we have covered all elementary schools. That was a decision of the board in May or June when I was in front of you.
It's a good idea, we're gonna double test there. I mean, Cortland shouldn't show anything, and if it does, that's rather interesting.
Just seems silly that they accept everything after 2001 and then you check something in 2009. It just seems
I
strange.
think
But
it's
we
just
just
a
have,
comfort thing.
It is more
I
of
think
a
it's good
comfort.
procedure.
yeah.
There's two issues at play. There's the bill or what's required by law, and then there's what's in the best risk management and safety for the district and students.
We check to see whether the 2001 thing works.
I don't expect to see anything.
Yeah.
And so that brings us to, we already know what our reporting requirement is, that's spelled out, but the mitigation. At what level, when we have those recommendations of the municipalities are 15, the US EPA is at 20, where is the board's comfort level in regards to this? So I'm asking for your discussion. And
Let me, I guess, ask, what do you see boards doing school districts? What level do you see that at?
It varies. We recommend, and we see some using the US EPA, right? Again, just so you know, it is a recommended guidance, a recommended action level, but it's in a US EPA document, 20 parts per billion. We do see some retesting, anything over 5, just to be conservative. I can tell you if I sample the school twice, I think that you might get 5 in a couple spots and then get different spots. It's just such a low level. But we do see some retesting and mitigating over 5, and when we've done that, we haven't, not every sample hasn't been below 5 the second time. So at some point,
Given the source water is allowed to rise to 15 and 20, and we are supposed to send these notices out to 5, what forms of mitigation do we take when we're in that difference range between 15 down to 5? we want to get below the necessary, we don't want to send out notices every time another test goes down.
Well, we will have to send it out if it comes in over 5. We don't have the option to turn around and retest.
What does mitigation look like? What are the forms that it takes? Filters? Is it filter? What is it?
There's a number of options with that. It can be replacing piping, it can be shutting down drinking fountains. We can choose to shut down a drinking source if we so choose, if it's not a regularly used one. There's filters.
It really varies.
Depends on-
It can be as simple as, you can absolutely get higher levels if the stream's not cleaned out on a water fountain. So it could be servicing and retesting if it's a water fountain here or there. It could be taking one out of service. When we're getting into piping replacements or piping repairs, typically you're gonna see that in multiple sources. You're gonna know that's a piping issue.
It looks like a nightmare to me because we have 3 different sources, right? Multi-port and decal. Every one of them has a different well system, pumping system, distribution system. And the thing that I don't understand, maybe you explain to me as to how we really know what's going on. And then after that, how we could mitigate or not, or who's responsible for mitigate or not, is that if you don't check it at the well and then at the delivery point to the building prior to entering the building, then how can you know where the source is? I mean, the city's going to say, or the villages are going to say, our testing says it's this. Where are they getting that result from? Where are they measuring that water?
I think that's something we have to test happen, and then, that kind of.
Yeah, but we're talking about mitigation. I think one leads to the other, right?
And we don't have that answer necessarily on how we are going to mitigate it at that point. It's going to depend on the results, where all those higher levels are located. Are they all consolidated in one building, one wing, one section, and what the source might be. And that for that, then we'll have to work together to determine the best option at that point.
Howard's question is really to the point, because if the city's saying, hey, we're delivering at 15, then we have to mitigate. Well, we don't have to by the law. We have to report it. But if they're going to deliver us 15 ppb lead in water, what are we going to do? There's very little. Okay, city, drop your numbers down. It's just like with the radium problem, right? You put in a system and dilute and RO and whatever.
Carrie, let's come up with a number here, because.
So we know the 5, the 15, and
But
the
the
20
policy
levels.
that we come up with and the number should be driven by funds available. And that's dependent on who owns the system, where the water is the source coming from.
Tammy's not here.
That's not going to be the case. The results are going to drive the mitigation, and depending on our levels, what that come in, we will have to make decisions at that time on how we are mitigating. And can you tell me how long of a time frame? Because I'm not remembering for mitigation from one of the results right now.
There's no
mitigation
time frame
requirement,
required.
right? 'Cause they
It's
don't
really,
know.
it's really how we want to respond as fast as we can. And
Well, you create an unfunded mandate is what happens.
Of
And
course
you
it is.
create it as a
Well,
report.
they already did that. This is an unfunded mandate, just like carbon
The
monoxide.
reporting is required.
Correct.
So here's what happened is we're gonna move forward on the test. We're gonna see where we are. We're gonna come back, we're gonna see what our levels are, then we're gonna make a decision about.
No, we need to make a decision before.
Yeah, one
Before
number.
the test is done.
So that raises the question.
Right.
At what level?
That's it.
Hold on, I got it. So I guess if the city is thinking 15 parts per billion, is that right?
Correct.
Is acceptable. So by state standards, so that seems to be acceptable.
that number comes from the Clean Water Act.
I would think that that's what we would want.
I mean, if they're feeding that out to us and we're feeding.
Ours go
ourselves-
higher than 15.
All right, hold on. And they're feeding all of us with that. Would we be wrong to think that would be okay in our school as well?
I would not be mitigating below 15. It would be surprising. The one caveat I would say is if we have a lot of 15s, there's not a one-way answer. We might have a situation when we look at and say we have a number of samples that are higher than we expect in this building. Maybe we might have something going on. We started something going on. we might want to look at it closer, but in general, is a general guideline.
Yeah.
I recommend mitigating a little bit.
Because I think the one statement that's just scary, when it says no, no level of lead is safe.
Right.
In which it's not,
It's known.
or known to be safe,
It means
yeah.
they don't know.
Right.
They don't,
I mean,
but
good,
it's
you
not,
can't,
this
but
isn't just
you're
focused on
inside to the
DeKalb school
statement.
district.
No, no, so that's what I mean, my point is, like,
Everything.
if we're here in DeKalb saying the 15 parts per billion is fine, what is going on around us? What are the other, what's Rochelle and what's Sycamore and what's Mendota, what are those guys, what is their water state, level, and with the lead?
Well, the municipalities are all the same, the 15 at.
They have to meet 15?
Yeah, that's a federal.
And the school
Okay.
district, it's a school district's choice because it is not
Sure.
dictated in this new law.
We've had school districts that use 20 as their limit. We've had some that use 20, they went down to 15 just because there was a little bit of political issue. They said, we'll get down to that 15, that way there's no question. We have had some that have retested at all the sources that were over 5 after they've done some mitigation. But I don't,
If our 15, if what we get is going to be, is not required to be anything above 15, right? I mean, if we get that requirement, and that's coming to our schools, I can't imagine how it's going to be anything less than what we get from whatever the city's going to
They
deliver.
could be coming in less.
Yes, of
Could
course.
be, but we don't know.
We don't.
Right.
What,
We'll be helping the city figure out what their level is. Because that's what's going to
They're
get
fishing for a number, the politicians and the people with the money are trying to figure out what the people are going to accept at what level. It's
Exactly.
completely unscientific, it's ridiculous.
I think
it is, but
I know.
but we are at a point, and
Yeah.
again,
Let's just say,
That's the
maybe we
time.
have to do this. And you can never,
Are we thinking 15?
That would be my,
You sure don't want to go any less than that if the city can deliver
No.
it.
the city can
well, that's kind of my thought.
And I just-
A child is going to get most of their drinking water probably from out of their kitchen sink at home.
or
We are-
a plastic bottle.
Or bottles.
Or
Yeah.
plastic bottles.
And they're not the best thing to drink out of either.
And what we ought
Well,
to
we
be
do.
looking for is we should be providing water that is at least as lead-free as what our students are getting at home.
Out of the sink.
They're out of the sink.
It's the 15.
That's what their source is. That's what mom cooks it.
So if I can have a consensus.
Yeah,
again.
Val, are you good with
I'll take
15?
15.
And Carrie, I know where
Gary,
you're so we'll just.
Gary's gonna respectfully abstain.
15.
I will obviously keep the board up to date as testing gets started.
Oh,
and-
I don't know, I wanted to ask too, as once this is all going and say we meet 15 and so on, and two things actually, so after it's all done, you come back, your price includes come back retesting to make sure that we're at that 15 or lower. And then after that's done, do we have to retest every year after this, just as test samples? You don't have to.
Not at this point.
Yeah.
Bill is a one-time
Right now.
test.
Okay.
And I can tell you that question's been asked by a few other districts, and probably would be good to get on some kind of schedule, certainly not, I don't think every year is warranted at this point. But there hasn't been any kind of consensus on water.
As you said about a filter in a water faucet, right, plugging up with, lead. I mean, that alone can cause a problem, even if the rest of the system is clean. That's why you retest, that's why you test more frequently.
I have a question. Who gives out the notification that it's above 5? We do, or you?
We do they will help us in putting that together, it'll get approved, and then we will be sending it out within the required.
So Aries creates a report and we send the report.
And they also assist with how that communication can look to help educate our parents and not come back in a scientific report that's hard to understand.
Okay, well, thank you, Tammy.
All right.
Yeah,
You better
thanks
make
so
sure you
much.
tell them how to spell your name, because they're gonna mess it up on purpose now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tam. Next, we have the non-business consent agenda. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the non-business consent agenda items A through F. Do we have a motion?
Did you move?
No. Motion?
Yes. So moved.
Do we have a second? Okay, discussion?
I know that Mr. Craven is not here today, but maybe Mr. Horn can answer this. Sean Potts and Amana Gwinnett, back in on June 20th, were both started at, right, granted that the board approved, 96,000. Now we have Ms. Donna Larson tonight, and we are to approve her contract. Now, what did we base her salary, since we do see a difference in her salary?
Yeah, and my understanding of that is that Amana Quinette and Sean's contract started July 1st. Donna's will start in August, so it was prorated on 11-month as opposed to the 12-month.
So then the following year she'll be at 96.
Correct. Or whatever, yeah, correct.
I just want to make sure, because it was stated that experience wasn't something that was factored in. So Amana Gwinnett having more experience, that wasn't.
It was based on the LUTA scale.
That was my question.
Yep.
I have a question about the teacher at Jefferson for the Arabic at 55.9K. Can someone give me some information on that particular position?
That's a position that we haven't been able to fill for at least 2 years. We couldn't find anybody, so it's very hard to fill a position, and we're fortunate to find somebody. So they're coming in higher because they have more education.
So where do they fit on the lane grade stuff, all that kind of thing? I mean, is that why we're at 55K, or are we paying a premium for the ability to?
No, we don't do that. It's because of their education background. They have more
So that's a
years of
master.
education.
Okay, so their education puts them further up to
Yes.
the matrix.
Yes.
Apparently masters.
Roll call, please.
Jeff Albright,
Yes.
Karen Malek,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Kenya Hernandez.
Yes.
Howard Solomon,
Yes.
Fred Davis.
Yes.
And then just with that, Donna Larson is our newest.
Yes. And Vicki Gardner and her husband Mike are here tonight. New assistant principal at Huntley Middle School.
Welcome. Next, we have business and finance, fiscal year 2017-18 differential assignments, and this is an informational item.
This is a work in progress, and what we have done is we've created, with the help of a lot of people, so Elizabeth helped a lot, the principals at the high school and the middle schools, and Nick and a lot of people, trying to gather a lot of data related to differentials. And to provide that to the board so you have a better understanding of what the differentials are, basically the clubs and the sports and the music programs, who are in those positions, their years of experience, their base pay, and just a lot of different factors related to that. I say this is a work in progress because right now what we're doing is trying to getting this information so we can place these people and have you approve them, or consider approval at the next board meeting to place these people in those positions for the next school year. And then after that, provide additional data about each of the different activities and clubs in terms of participation numbers, how often do they meet, just a lot of different information that we can gather so you can have a better understanding, and we can manage that program efficiently in terms of costs and what the kids are actually doing. This is really the start of the ones that are paid differentials that are listed in the DCTA contract at the moment. We do want to expand this to other activities where people are volunteering their time, just so we're all aware of who's doing that and what those look like as well. So this initial spreadsheet, I know it's sort of small and there's a lot of data. I know, sorry. You can zoom it a little larger. But again, this is going to become fairly large because it is going to be a fairly comprehensive database of a lot of information. But we can sort it and do whatever we need to do it and break it down in pieces later as well. So when we bring information back, because we do want to include this, information regarding transportation, how many trips they take, how much does that cost, so we can really get a good handle on the entire program and the pieces of the program, whether it be music or clubs or sports or specific sports, high school, elementary, middle schools. That's really what this is. So I don't, and the next meeting, we'll be bringing the list. It'll probably be retooled a little bit and resorted so you can see what you'll be looking at in terms of potential approval of positions and who's in those positions and the amounts that they're getting paid.
Howard had his hand up first, Jeff.
Cindy, within middle school football, we have combined Huntley and Rosette. Yet there are 2 head coaches listed. Is that going to be taken care of and rectified?
Yeah, and I talked to Nick on that, and he has an idea of what that might be, but we just have to.
We checked with Dan. One's the McIntyre is the 7th grade coach, and Weller's the 8th grade coach.
Okay, so there's 2 grades.
So how many people are there in this database? How many differential positions do we have?
I have to add it up.
Okay. And how many dollars are amongst those number of positions? Those are 2 numbers I'd like to see.
A lot.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, looking at this database.
It seems like a lot, but the other question that I couldn't make it, but then I guess my eyes weren't good. But the thing that I couldn't understand is, I see numbers there as far as how much we're paying, but I don't see the equivalent number of, you can't do it by hourly rate, but it seems to me that I can't really make a judgment as to what we're getting back from the money that we're spending on it. It just seems.
And that's the point of this, to make that determination. Based on the compensation and the numbers of children and students in the programs and what they're doing, how often they're meeting, just the whole scope of what all these positions.
It's an accountability issue too that we're looking at right now to see, where's that shift? We see a lot of our fine arts numbers going up, choir and harmonic fusion. Where are those kids? Where were they? And where are they going? What's their interest? And that's a lot of what we're trying to get to here also.
And then I'm making the assumption that we're looking at it as a return on investment. We're saying, okay, are we getting a return on investment for the things that we're putting out, the money that we're putting out? I don't mean to make it come down to a money issue, but it just seems to me that I can't draw any conclusion. This is a work in progress. I'm making the assumption.
Yeah, that's
right?
absolutely, yeah.
Cindy and her staff, they've done
a lot of work.
Job.
Yeah.
This has been like maybe a month. If
Yeah,
that
probably
work,
won't,
it's
yeah.
been, but it's
Just gathering the data,
Yeah,
number
gathering
one,
the
because
data.
it came in pieces and parts. In the past, it was coming from middle school to high school. This one had a spreadsheet here, this one there. Then trying to corral it in one place, and it was really difficult to really track it properly. So this is really an attempt to bring that all together in one spot, and then to use this as the tool to move forward so we can do that analysis.
And to get it in hand, I would think just starting to get a grasp of what we have here and the kind of money that we're working with and just kind of get it in hand. Because if you, these things flare up at various places and we don't have a comprehensive.
That's exactly the reason, why we're doing this.
happening.
Was there any rhyme or reason in past history, say 10 years ago, that the assignment, or not the assignment, the evaluation, I don't mean the assignment of a person to job, but.
I guess basically they have to interview. It's the same process as if we're hiring for, a teacher or, it's almost a position.
So that's part of the bargaining then?
Well, these are all part of the teachers' union's contract.
These are positions.
Yes, that are within.
That are within the bargaining contract.
Yes.
But in the beginning, if there was ever a beginning,
Well,
sometime
like
in ancient
prior
history.
Wow, that's a good question. I'm
How
sure
did
it
they
evolved.
say, a high school football coach differential position is worth this much, and it's worth this much over at the middle school?
Yeah, I think.
How do they determine that?
It was evolutionary. They've been in the contract as long as, I've been here 11 years, obviously even prior to that.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's just
Sure,
been
goes back.
based on student participation
Yeah.
and probably something that really just needs to get evaluated more closely.
Well, it's a lot of work, and thank you so much for doing it, and thank you everybody for putting your effort into it. It's something that really we need to get a handle on. I think that's terrific. It's a huge amount of work. It's not like you don't have other things to do.
And also, Carrie, to think about it, and when you're coaching or whatever they get paid, it may seem like a lot of money sometimes, but if they kept track of their time in, it'd be pennies on
Well,
hour.
maybe that's part of the problem. I mean, in the sense that, you know, like when you go from hourly to salary in any job, right?
Yeah,
All of a sudden you go from 40 hours a week, maybe overtime, to you gotta be here when you gotta be here, right? And so some people put in a lot of time and other people don't. You know, so it's hard to measure.
it's easy to complain about people make, but when you keep track of their hours, it ain't funny.
Cindy,
A long time.
we have a consensus then to bring this back as an action item at the next meeting?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Will it be amended as it comes?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, and it won't look like this, because what my plan is kind of chunk it out in different pieces, so you're
You're
not.
gonna hand out magnifying glasses.
Yeah, this is sort of a laundry list.
Or
but,
more paper.
Once we get this together, then we can kind of chunk it out into the various different levels.
Well, so what I want is that we understand what we're gonna be doing, if this is an action item next time, right?
Mhm.
You know, that whatever you're gonna send us, and meanwhile,
Yeah.
will be good enough for us to get a pretty good grasp
Yes.
on where we are,
Yeah, absolutely.
okay, before we vote on it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks. Next, we have approval of tentative budget for fiscal year 2017, 2018. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the fiscal year 2017, 2018 tentative budget for public display in anticipation of adoption on September 19, 2017. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. So you do need us to,
Yeah, I'll briefly go through the presentation. I know a lot of this we saw it last time at the board meeting. This just has a little more level of detail. Then we can kind of decide which general state aid proration number we'd like to use. And again, this is a tentative budget, meaning right now, what we're required to do is put this on display for 30 days prior to adoption, which would happen in September, the second meeting in September, which I believe is the 19th. So really, it's just procedurally, we need to go through this process, get this out there for public display, but between now and then, we can make changes to this budget. And we're going to have to make changes because even I got an email right before the board meeting saying downstate, they're not really working very well together and trying to figure out what this school funding model is going to look like. So we'll have to do some changes once we know that. But again, the budget is our financial plan. We use it as a tool for projections. We estimate revenues, and it's built based on expenditures. This is important just to know we're on a modified accrual basis. I know that's kind of accounting jargon, but what that means is we record our revenues when we receive them and expenses when they're paid, but also at fiscal year end, we kind of shore up that time period. So we account for revenue that we receive after the fiscal year end. If it belongs to the previous fiscal year, we push that back into the previous fiscal year, which is typically monies due from the state of Illinois, which is still at about 3.7 million. And then we also defer our property tax revenue to the correct fiscal year. So we receive property tax dollars in May and June, and then also in mostly like July, August, September. Anything that we receive in May and June of 17, that's allocated to the 17-18 fiscal year, even though we received it in the prior fiscal year. So we move those dollars forward. And then the same thing with expenses, like teacher salaries, they get their paychecks over the summer as well. And that money technically was dollars that they were paid for contracts in the previous fiscal year. So we push that back. So we're kind of moving some dollars around to get into the correct fiscal years. We went through this last time, what our budget building process looks like. Again, this is the same almost slide we had last year. We did get a little bit of state money. It was about 3.8 million. Now it's like 3,794. So we got a little bit of money, but we're still waiting, and that number is the same as today. Last year we waited till January to receive the rest of our funds. Again, we're just not sure what that's going to look like till the state figures out what's going on. And full funding, we're in a wait and see mode. General state aid again, just the quick history. We received all of our general state money last year. We budgeted 95%, so that's a good thing, although we're still waiting for the categorical payments. And over a 5-year period, we have lost about 7.8 or 7.1 million in general state aid due to prorations that they've had in the last few years. So the next slide is really where to focus on the different options, and we went through these last time, but just kind of summarizing with the 89% proration of general state aid, 95%, and 100%. What I've done is the tentative budget I put together uses the 95%, but that doesn't mean we can use that one. We can use whichever you prefer to use. But I figured that was a logical one to use just because that's what we did last year, and we did receive 100% of our funds for general state aid. So I just use that as when I'm going through the rest of the tentative budget. So here, I'm not going to go through every line item here, but basically this is the tentative revenue budget for all our funds for fiscal year 17-18, which is broken down by the different funds as well as their local sources, state sources, and federal sources. And if we go to the next slide, it's a little bit better picture of what our revenues look like for our operating budget. So you can see over 60% of our revenues come from local sources, which is primarily property taxes. We get some corporate personal property tax, student fees, and then donations. But the bulk of that is the property taxes. Federal sources are about 6.26%, which are title grants and the reimbursement for the National School Lunch Program. And state sources is about 33%, which is general state aid, the state-funded grants, our special education reimbursement transportation, which is the categorical payments. So that is a fairly good chunk of change. That's why we're in this mode that we're not real sure where we're going to stand. The next slide is our expenditure budget, and this is broken down by salaries, benefits, purchase services, materials, capital outlay, and other, which includes tuition on the education fund side. And this is broken out for each of the different funds. And then the next slide is, again, another pie chart, which breaks this down by the operating budget. And you can see, obviously, the largest portion of our expenditures are in salaries and benefits, as well as probably the next biggest looks like it is purchase services, which that's really our transportation, our food service, our insurance, those types of things. Materials is about 4%, which is supplies and materials for classrooms, as well as O&M materials and keeping the buildings going. Capital outlay is about 2%, and then other, which includes tuition. Largest portion of that is the tuition paid to mostly special education agencies that handle our outplaced students. So the next here is when we're looking at our adjusted budget for this past fiscal year and our tentative budget, where are the changes in expenditures? So I know Jeff, you had asked about that at the last meeting. So those changes, or that increase, is about 1.5 million in expenditures. And primarily, the largest is salary and benefits. We have additional people that we've hired, and then just the natural salary increases as well that have happened. Purchase services, the largest increase there is the transportation, because that's as well as O&M had some budget expansions, and some of those were in purchase services. In capital outlay, that is primarily the expansion of the tech budget and the operations and maintenance budget. So those are kind of the big tickets and where those increases have occurred. So the next slide is really a summary of our tentative budget, just taking all that information and putting it into one slide and by fund, revenues, expenditures, what our surplus deficits look like for each of those funds, and then what we're estimating what our beginning fund balance for this fiscal year, and then what that ending fund balance is going to look like. And then this, I know this is one we show a lot because it gives us a nice history of where we've been, well, since 2006. So you see the revenues and expenditure bars where we stay, in some cases a little higher, some cases a little lower, and just kind of, again, keeping that line fairly level, which is the fund balance line, that red line. So we want to keep that obviously above zero and as level as possible. So again,
what was that spike? What was that? What we
that was when we received construction grant dollars from the state at $21 million. That was back in 2011 and 2012. So we did have a spike in revenue. And then we kept a 10 million of that. We used some of that to do some improvements to buildings, and then we kept a core of that, about 10 million in working cash funds to help us obviously through these times. Which
we're whittling away at.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the unknown is time again, the state budget. was passed, but we're still waiting for that funding piece for the schools. There could potentially be a change in that funding formula. Last we heard it was good for us, but we don't, right now, we just don't know what it's gonna look like. The governor really is vetoed, and we're really just have to wait and see how that works out. We don't know about the general state aid proration, potentially a property tax freeze. That was something that was talked about. Did not get through on the state budget, but now with all this talk going on with the school funding, I'm not sure if that's going to be dragged into this as well, so we'll just have to wait and see. Pension payment cost shift, again, something that's always been out there being talked about. Is that going to get shifted to local school districts? Another thing we're not real sure about, but something we just have to keep on our radar. The delayed payments, it's still 4.6 billion that the comptrollers can't pay because there's no money in the bank to pay it. That's for all state, not just us, obviously. And again, we're still waiting for our 3.8 million for our state categorical payments from the last year. So again, future consideration, cost benefit analysis of all programs, kind of getting that started when we were looking at this, the differential piece, trying to, get that for all in one spot, as well as our bond rating. We'll be restructuring those bonds in the fall, so we do want to keep that bond rating as high as possible, although it just depends on the state as well. Unfortunately, the state of Illinois doesn't help us with that. But.
So, as I recall from last time, if we get all our money from the state, we're still 300 under. Is that for next year? Are we still 300 less?
You mean for 16, 17?
Yeah. 17, 18.
Oh, 17, 18. Well, let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
So this is kind of that summary. So let's go back to, we need to determine what that GSA funding looks like. So if we were to say the 95%, we're looking at a deficit of about 1.7 million. At 100%, it's about 700,000, and it's about 3 million. So there's the different, and every 1% up or down is about $200,000 in general state aid proration. So.
And that's just based on GSA, not including the pension shift or any of these other possibilities.
Right. Yes.
Which could put us deeper in debt.
Depending on if those went, again, I've had that slide on there for 5 years.
Yeah, right.
And it's every year, it's just, we don't want to lose sight of it, but we just don't know.
The thing that's disconcerting, it seems to me, is that 100% still leaves us 733 under.
And that's if they don't change the funding formula. This is all based on the current funding formula. So let's just say Senate Bill 1 did go through and everything was just fine. We were scheduled to receive another almost $2 million on top of this. So that would basically wipe out the deficit. Actually, yeah, and have a surplus. So, yeah.
So Cindy, but we have 30 days that we can
Yes.
make
Well,
changes.
yeah, well, until the September 19th meeting when the budget comes for adoption. At that point, depending on the information we have, these numbers will change. I just know that for a fact it will change, depending, and I would hope that the state makes a decision. Well, technically, they need to make a decision by August 10th, because that's when the first general state aid payments are due. Whether that happens or not, we don't know. But again, this is subject to change once in September when we actually adopt the budget and know more.
I have a question. We really haven't given thought particularly. I know that it's so much in flux. And every time you say, well, we could get another 2 mil or whatever, I know that, but do we have any kind of plan, I hesitate to call it, well, do we have a plan whereby we can batten down the hatches? What is our absolute worst case situation for trying to tighten up the budget, where we can tighten up this budget? I know that we've done that, sort of. Everybody is looking at it. I know that we've expanded the number of kids in the classroom. It's challenging, but it's what you would do at your house if you were sitting around the table, at the kitchen table, and said, looks like we're going to be $30,000 in debt, and and we're tapped out on our credit cards. What can we do? You know, I mean, it is just, it really is very frustrating for me to look at that and see that kind of, and I know that's frustrating for you,
Yes.
but it's really frustrating for me to look at it and see, and from going to the FFAC, I'm looking at 7, or, you know, I mean, we look 5 years down the road, and it's gonna be threateningly huge. I mean,
Well, what makes it harder is we could sit here and say easily, well, that's easy, we can just cut people.
I understand.
You can do that, that's the hard part.
I know,
you
it's huge.
So you take from one, and, you know, you're gonna pay one way or the other. So, I mean, you know, it's tough.
I understand that, but what I'm saying as a board here, or as a board member here, I mean, it was one of the things that has driven me to be here, and that is, I find it untenable to be in that situation where we sit around and we look at that,
But I think that's a retreat issue too. I mean, we're gonna list priorities.
I know.
And that is probably priority looking at this in the.
I want to remind everybody that if we did put that $10 million out of the $21 million construction grant into the fund balance, we would be right now in that untenable situation. We're only not like Sycamore. They've had problems over last year, right? There's an article in the paper today. They've made some progress. Good for them. But if it weren't for that extra money that we were fortuitously, you know, given, we would be in deep trouble right now. So when you say that if Senate Bill 1 goes through as it was proposed, and it probably won't, but if it does, we would get $2 million. We would actually have a surplus of 733, and deficit would become some part of the surplus. But ultimately, in my mind, it's not a surplus. I mean, I'm with, you know, Jeff's thinking is that you've got to have a plan. And we've been through this before. I can remember how many times Andrea talked about, well, we cut the copier paper, and we did this, we did that, all the low-hanging fruit, she used to say, right? You guys figured out ways, you know, and we try to avoid what Fred's talking about, you know, cutting staff, you know, making the classes even bigger than they already are. We've been through that. It was quite a while ago, actually.
Yeah, back then, I mean, we've got a whole list of budget reductions that we had in the past, yeah. That, you know, that stayed off, and that was before the construction grant.
Right,
I mean, we
right.
wanted to do those things, to be
Right.
proactive. And so, yeah, do we have to start looking at specific programs? Absolutely.
And the construction grant just bothers me to no end, because I was, there was a group of us in FFAC that tried to figure out how do we bring equity back into the district. We accomplished some of that.
Yeah.
And now we just put another portable out there.
Cindy, what would you recommend here with the tentative budget?
You know, I honestly would go with the 95%. And the only reason I'm saying that even is because we know we can change it at this point. I mean, that makes logical sense just based on the past. I know the future is a little murky, but it does make some logic to use that number. 89% I think is a little too aggressive. And 100, I think, aggressive meaning on the other side, 100 I think is, I don't think I want to go there yet.
We have a consensus then to go with Cindy's recommendation at 95%.
Well, wait a minute. What was the percentage we used, say, 2 or 3 years ago?
We were using 89%.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So why would we go 95 now? I mean, are things that much better now that we would?
Well, based on just recent history. Based
Of
on
our spending habits or of the political process?
Revenue side.
on the revenue side.
On the revenue side.
Yeah. Yeah, this is just based on the revenue side. Yeah, expenditures stays the same in every one of these scenarios.
Yeah.
And again, subject to change. I mean, when the adoption happens, it's going to look different. And
Yeah.
we don't want
I
it.
would say going forward, we can take a recommendation, that would be nice.
Sure, I mean, you know, before September 19th,
Yeah.
we may go to the 89%, we don't know what we'll go to,
Well, yeah.
We'll know.
but hopefully we'll know if the legislature ever gets their act.
Well, they're going to have a lot of pressure on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So good, okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you very much for all your work.
Okay, next we have approval of purchase order requisition list. And this is a roll call. Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, roll call. I'm sorry.
Yeah, 'cause we have to prove stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terry Bollett,
Yes.
Corey Newport,
Yes.
Melanie Hernandez, Howard Solomon,
Yes.
Fred Davis,
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht.
Yes.
Now we have approval of purchase order requisition list. This is an action item that the Board of Education approved the purchase order requisition list as attached. Do we have a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Valerie Pena Hernandez. Howard Solomon.
Yes.
Troy Davis.
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht.
Yes.
Aaron Olet.
Yes.
Victoria Newport.
Yes. Next is new business and administration, staffing proposal, auditorium manager, and a facility rental coordinator. And this is an informational item. Tammy and James.
What we're bringing to you tonight is a proposal in regards to combining two existing positions. Our auditorium manager at the high school, as well as the rental coordinator position that is actually a district position. So a little bit of history. Back in 2011, the board approved when we opened the high school, the addition of an part-time auditorium manager for up to 25 hours a week to service DeKalb High School's Fine Arts Wing. In 13, because of the extent of the use of the high school that was added, the board also approved a part-time facility rental coordinator for up to 20 hours a week to handle all rentals throughout the district. In 15, we've gone, after 4 years and 3 auditorium managers, the district hired the current auditorium manager. And in 2017, the facility rental coordinator position was vacated by what was the second person to hold the position over the 4 years. So as we sit today, as of February of this year, we have not had a rental coordinator in place. My administrative assistant has been covering those duties because we were entering a very slow time of year. And so to save some salary dollars, she was able to absorb it just to get us by for a while, knowing that by the middle end of summer, we were going to have to either hire a replacement or look at other options like we are doing today.
Some benefits of the proposal: the merging of the auditorium manager and the rental coordinator. At the high school, it creates one point person to help with the management of the activities that are happening in the Fine Arts Wing, as well as the management of the Fine Arts Wing in general. It's a state-of-the-art facility. There's lots of high-tech gadgets there, so really having a professional there to oversee that is beneficial. So to give you a point of reference, this is one example, in late February, early March, our a cappella program drew a standing-only crowd. Less than a month later, we did have a spring musical that had a very complex stage setup that was put up. And less than a month later, we had our spring sing that drew in all the elementary schools throughout the district. The final a cappella program of the 16-17 school year was held in June. The first a cappella program of the 17-18 school year is scheduled for this Saturday. So, and it's just one program at the high school, and looking at how that's attracting folks from the community and looking at how that's growing. At the same time, the facility is being utilized throughout all of District 428. All of this, mind you, at a time when Chromebooks are collected over the summer and are housed in that wing. So it's one person that is coordinating all of that and making sure that events are being properly organized and properly run, as well as the auditorium is being well maintained. And also it gives the opportunity for that person to look at how we can utilize our one-to-one technology, looking at streaming our plays, streaming our concerts, so that folks that have family live outside of the community can do that.
The other pitfall, I'll say, that we found over the years since we've opened the new high school has been that, if you recall, Huntley Middle School is currently being rented by NIU because their Stevens building is under construction. So we're entering our 5th year there, so it hasn't been as available to the school district, and outside groups and even our inside elementaries haven't been using Huntley Middle School. But once NIU ends that contract after the school year, that space will be available, and technically we do not have anyone in that space to manage it as groups are coming in with the expertise that they need for sounds and lights and different things that are needed by those outside groups or inside groups.
Would this person do Huntley as well?
Correct. Well,
Helping people, both high school and Huntley, once that is vacated by Northern.
and even before then, there are some things that do come in throughout the year in between NIU schedule that they can assist with.
Doesn't that create a conflict possibly with dates? I mean, if you have one person they can't do both at the same time, can they? If you have an event at the high school and an event at Huntley
But we
on the
do,
same day?
this one person that is currently holding the auditorium manager position has developed a club that was presented to you last year and has attracted a core group of at least 12 students, if not more, that he has been training and teaching all of the aspects of managing a program. And we have some really knowledgeable students that have come a very long way that are considering this for a possible career path because of that club. So they could be ones that are assisting. And in addition, the individual also has more contacts in the community than I do in this area, or James does, I believe, in regards to if we had to pull and hire people from outside to manage an event or run sound or tech, they would be able to help us in coordinating those efforts.
And one benefit of it is the person overseeing both. That way you don't have two major events happening on either side of town. Major events such as acapella would be happening on a minor event that they could be managed by a student. Would be happening in Huntley.
I know this is somewhat peripheral to the discussion, but so Northern is going to leave Huntley, is that
They're refurbishing their facility.
theoretically?
They've been doing that forever. Is that
I
a
know,
result of
but
the state
so
budget?
do they know,
Yes.
do they know something that I don't know? Are they gonna make it actually happen, or?
And in all my contacts with the NIU staff that we work with, they anticipate they'll be moving out of our Huntley Middle School this spring and occupying their Stevens building this coming spring.
So
If not,
10 months from now, or whatever it would be.
their contract ends. We've had 2 auto renewals that were already in place. We've extended it for 2 years beyond their original 3-year. So if that doesn't happen, we need to sit down and talk to Huntley administration and district administration to decide how to move forward.
This is somewhat peripheral, but it was a question that I had when I was running, and it was given to me. So our high school is much more state-of-the-art than Huntley.
Correct.
Why are we doing it with Northern to Huntley instead of?
The high school is heavily used.
Heavily used.
We
So
with
our
our
schedule
programs,
Oh, yeah.
and yeah, our
Too much-
programs went first.
Too much schedule coverage.
I think, did the NIU get involved with negotiations before the high school was even available? Was it after the high school was done?
It was after.
Completely done? Okay.
It was.
And
And
that
they
was
actually didn't
mothballed.
even express an interest in the high school because they knew that the schedule just wouldn't.
And that project wasn't mothballed until the school was done anyway. So,
Yeah.
You got any more slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So just some general information of why.
Well, I don't want to ask much questions, but I'm going to get my answer.
Okay. There's a number of reasons groups would want to rent our facilities, and that's one thing we see by bringing this position to a full-time status. There are districts that have a fine arts area like ours that are attracting outside groups that want to do various types of events and pay nice money for that. We can't handle that right now with a 25-hour-a-week auditorium manager. We need that person at a higher level, and during those peaks and valleys of the rental season, be able to fit that into his schedule. So it just outlined in your presentation specifically what the auditorium, all the state-of-the-art equipment. We have a black box theater that we have underutilized to this point that we could be utilizing in much better fashion, not only for our district, but for outside groups, and we can rent that out. A number of things that tied into that black box theater. And then obviously the other facilities, we've got the makeup rooms, the dressing rooms, the rehearsal, we have a ticket booth. The auditorium manager has ideas in regards to automating our ticket system that, again, the time is just not there to do what needs to be done to make this the center that it should be.
There is a cost associated with it. We're taking 2 part-time positions, creating a full-time position. That the cost is going to be the benefits. So the benefits are out there lined out for you depending on what direction this individual goes with the benefit package. So we want to have that for your consideration. One thing that we do want to take a look at though is that looking to build a better auditorium, it's not just about building the auditorium to support the programs of the high school within D428, but really looking to use it as a way to generate some revenue, to get some return on our investment, and looking to the outside groups to come in and to utilize that facility. Yes.
So with the numbers being set up there, and I know now it's kind of hard to, but how much have we generated financially? I mean, I'm sure you probably don't have it right down to the dollar, but
Right now, we're not doing much to attract outside groups, and we don't look to make you know, a
I'm
lot of
afraid you
money.
can't maintain it right now the way you would like to.
Correct.
The outside groups that we are bringing in, Fred, that we do receive some funding from, is typically just to offset our staffing costs.
Yeah.
Because we do, if it's an outside group, we do charge them for our custodial, I'm charge them for our
Right.
lecture, but it is strictly to offset those costs. We aren't looking at the entire package to maintenance and upkeep, utilities and
Right.
paper costs and all of
And
that.
that's what we'll hope to do here. We could get enough in to help pay for this
Absolutely.
person and
Absolutely, and like we say up here, you know, the first year is gonna be a rebuilding year. We need to start tracking this, identifying opportunities. The second year, our goal would be, you know what, it'd be great if we could break even, come up with a tracking, so we're able to break even on the costs associated with this position as well as that wing. And then look at opportunities to grow as the years
Yeah.
continue.
So
And
you-
maintain it to the level it needs to be.
my last question. You had mentioned earlier about, Carrie had brought up, or somebody about, if there's events on both sides of town here, that they got a group of people that some of they've trained to help out, so to speak. So if there's not two events going on at the same time, will this coordinator, manager, whatever the title would be, would they be required to be at the event instead of one of their trained people?
Absolutely.
In case of something.
There has to be reason, I mean, within
Yeah,
reason, there
yeah.
can be times that we would look at a substitute if necessary
Sure.
based on their own schedule, but
Sure.
primarily they would be the point person
Okay,
for these
good.
events.
Okay.
Do I remember something about we can't turn a profit on this kind of thing? And some time ago, I mean, this is a long time ago, when we were talking about the concept of the community using the facilities of the district.
We have to be careful because of the bonds, because they're tax exempt bonds, so we can't really make a profit or lease for a large profit because of those bonds, because then we can potentially lose that tax.
That's what it was. Yeah, I remember something.
But we always have the opportunity to reinvest those dollars into upkeep and maintenance and expenses of
Yeah.
Yeah,
that.
but we
Which
can't
right now
consider this
is-
to be a profit.
No.
No, you're right. From that
Just
standpoint.
the replacement cost alone, will help us with the seats and.
It lifts some of the burden from us.
Yeah.
And there
It
are
sounds-
many, please consider too, there are other safety factors, and again, being that this equipment is not just a standard light bulb typically.
Exactly.
There's a lot of knowledge that has to be in this individual that even our general maintenance do not have. They don't have that ability to walk in and fix some of these things or know who to call for these specialties. A full-time auditorium manager would really assist in managing that piece.
So my other question is, we've had a lot of turnover, right? So
The
why?
auditorium manager?
Yeah,
Why? Because it's a part-time position and a lot of people have come into it with the look to grow it and wanting to get into a full-time position. The individuals we've had are typically younger individuals that are just coming out of college in this field. And this is just a stepping stone for those individuals.
So this would theoretically solidify some of that movement that we do.
Yes, and I will say this, I have to say, the current auditorium manager, he's phenomenal. His commitment level, he has students, his own children have gone through the district and are currently in the district. And his knowledge and commitment and experience that are already on the table at the current number of hours, we're very fortunate to have him.
And
To have that
would be the person
opportunity.
we want to move into.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Is the auditorium manager that you have in mind, the person who's there now,
Yes,
are they part of a professional organization like GCTA represented? Are they
no,
separate
and
managerial?
they would not be. They would be unaffiliated. We would change the reporting structure. The rental coordinator position reported through the facilities department. The auditorium manager currently reports to the high school principal. Combining these into one, we will then, we found that the structure, typically that position would report up through the facilities department because it would be serving all of the buildings, not just the high school.
so how do they keep you guys, the principals, informed, say yourself, James, and Ed Huntley? In this new situation?
In this new situation, in regards to the district using it, it would run exactly the same way as it has in the past, and even outside groups for that matter. The principal or the athletic director, whoever it might be, the point person in the buildings, they are the ones that approve the initial, yes, this group can use our facility. That would still continue to James when it comes to use the
So
auditorium.
you get a heads up
They get approval
before,
first.
There's a process.
And then it goes to the rental coordinator to determine costs and scheduling and all of that piece and communicating with the renter.
Thank you. Do we have a consensus to bring this back as an action item on the 15th?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, James.
Next, we have recommended revisions to school policy 7:40. This is a first reading, and this is for discussion.
Yes, this is related to, in our policy now, it's policy 740, related to non-public school students, including parochial homeschool students. And the area that we're looking at including is highlighted in your board docs there. And it's basically, I'll just read it, the Palatine Unit School District Board of Education does not prohibit participation in extracurricular activities by homeschool or private school students. However, District 428 officials recognize that participation in extracurricular activities is not a material or property right, rather a privilege. So for correct extracurricular activities that are limited to a specific number of participants requiring cuts, District 428 students will have first priority in being selected to a team, and homeschool students and private school students will be selected if any positions remain available. So basically, if we do have to make any be to those students first rather than other students. Then also in non-cut activities, District 428 reserves the right to refuse participation if accepting homeschool students or private school students requires additional expenditures on behalf of the district. So that is what we.
This is for middle school, right? Or
well, it doesn't specifically say middle school. Yeah, it's basically all interscholastic programs. So
this came up through the middle schools where students from St. Mary's were coming over and participating in sports at Huntley. And what was happening, we found like in volleyball that students from DeKalb were cut and St. Mary's kids were participating ahead of our students. So that was one of the examples of where we saw it happening.
Yeah, it just gives us more flexibility with that.
I know you're good. Go.
No, he's all right.
It looks like you were ready.
Don't worry, you can follow me.
I really haven't talked about this that much, but, you know, some. Yeah, right. And it goes back to this, okay? I had some friends in Malta, you know, a long time ago, Malta in 2000, Malta merged in 428. Okay, I had friends there that were trying to get their kids, and of course, to make matters worse, the right school, you know, what is now Malta Elementary School, was a choice school run with collaboratively with NIU, and then that went away, and so on and so forth. So people in Malta felt sort of alienated. You know, first they take the whole school system away, and they bring them into DeKalb, you know, and then they take the right school away, and then they send the kids over to Founders. You know, so there's been some hard feelings, I think, from time to time. Okay, so a number of my friends, and this goes back a number of years before I was on the board, talked to me back when Jim Briscoe was our superintendent and said, can you talk to that guy over there and see if you can't get our kid, you know, to be able to go to a Malta school rather than go over to Founders all the way to DeKalb? Well, that's just the background, okay, for what I'm going to say now.
Okay, I was wondering why you were.
Yeah, okay. So here's my point of view on this thing, right? So at face value, at first glance, I say to myself, yeah, this makes sense. I mean, you don't want a kid going to DeKalb school getting bumped by somebody going to private school. And then I thought about it and I said, wait a second. These people that send their kids to St. Mary's or wherever they send them to or homeschool, they pay property taxes. They don't get a pass on paying their property taxes just because they're not sending their kid to 428 schools.
But Karen, that's a choice they're making.
Yes, it is, but they're paying the price. And they're also paying the price to send them to that other school, right? So in my view, this would make lots of sense. I have no problem at all with it if they weren't paying a property tax or if they had some reduction in how much they pay or something to that effect. I'm not so sure I like it. I mean, the more I think about it, I mean, I understand it, and you know, and I certainly understand from the team point of view, from the sports point of view, from the kids in the school that want to participate at their school on a sports team or forensics or whatever it might be. Right? That makes sense to me, but it also makes sense to me economically that if you're paying $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 in property taxes each year to District 428, you ought to be able to get something for that, whether or not your kid is at that school. So I have a little bit of a mixed feeling about this. Now, anybody else understand?
I have the same, exactly the same mixed feeling, but I can see where there'd be resentment from the kids on the team. I mean, that is to say that, that you're getting these 6 St. Mary's people that are on the team and you're not, right? I mean, I can see where that would be. I have a little bit more of a problem with homeschool. I have a little bit more of a problem with that. I mean, I can understand that the feeling that St. Mary's, there's an institution attached to it. The homeschool, there's no attachment to it. I mean, I can't see why you would bump a homeschool person off of a team. What is the difference between a person who's being taught and a person who's homeschooled? The tax base is exactly the same. The amount of taxes are the same. So I understand the institution. I understand the resentment part of it from the St. Mary's. I think I understand your point of view, but I think the homeschool thing, that's baloney. I mean, I really think just because they're homeschooled, they need to socialize, they participate in our sports. I can't see any reason in the world why you bump a homeschool person off the team just because they're homeschooled. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. The St. Mary's part of it. The St. Mary's part, I can understand the resentment, but they're still paying the taxes. So it just it's a weird situation. But I really don't think it should be just just a sweep of the brush to say, you're not taught here, you can get bumped off the team.
But that's not, if they're saying
If there's a
There'll be a preference.
Yeah.
that the preference should be given to the people that are.
It's not, we have an issue too with like track. We have the students coming over, and now we have to put another person in for supervision. So we're paying now additional funds,
I understand, but it's still all tax dollars.
It is.
It's all being paid for,
it is.
and they're paying the additional amount to go to St. Mary's. I think this second-rate citizen part of it for the St. Mary's kids, where they have to go to Aurora to go to a track, to use a track in Aurora or whatever, however that works out. I think that second-class stuff is baloney. It's all we get their tax dollars.
It's still choices they make though.
No, it's not. I mean, it's a choice they make, but they pay for that to go to St.
Oh,
Mary's.
that's right.
But they don't have to pay less for the
But I
taxes.
can tell you this from being a coach. I think when coaches come down, I would say probably, I'd almost say 99% of them, they're not gonna cut a kid just because you're from St. Mary's. You're gonna cut a kid because they ain't cutting.
Well, that I can see every day of the week.
So I mean, if it works out that way, I can see where parents are upset or other people, but.
I understand that part of it, Fred, very much, that, if they can't cut it on the team, that you get rid of it.
Yeah, it don't matter where you're
anyway.
from.
But I feel that I really feel this, I mean, certainly for the homeschool kids, I don't see any reason why anybody would give any preference to anybody over them. So not just because of we only have 6 people on the team, that one's homeschooled, they gotta go off the team because they're homeschooled, right? I mean, that doesn't work.
So this policy change came about from who, like, how was this brought up and created?
You said it came from the middle schools?
Well, this is mostly a middle school, but we don't have any issue in high school with like the St. Mary's. I mean, we don't have a private.
There is no
I just-
competition, there's no
There's
St. Mary's at
homeschool
that
for
point.
Right, and then they participate.
They don't. And how does
They
your,
don't? I don't.
Right.
I mean, I agree with Gary.
So Nick, what is so we don't have any homeschoolers in the high school?
So the policy is kind of confusing, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Mr. Craven about it because I just read it over the weekend and I knew he was on vacation. So if you read the first bullet point to that, I don't know what it says.
Bullet point, which
Well-
one? The top?
Sorry.
The first paragraph?
Where it says right here, underneath extracurricular activities, including interscholastic competition, it says a non-public school student is eligible to participate in interscholastic competition, provided his or her participation adheres to the regulation established by the association. So I'm assuming, I'm just interpreting, I think this could be confusing to our public, because we've had questions at the high school about homeschool kids and, well, basically homeschool kids, because we don't have a private school here. If they are in a private school, they have to obviously play high school athletics at that school, but IHSA doesn't allow it. But the IHSA has a policy where if you are homeschooled, you have to be enrolled in your high school, and your homeschool credits have to be accredited by a school board policy, that you guys have to accredit the company where they're getting that from. We don't have any of that in our policies. So, but all the way back to when I came here, we've had people asking us, and Dr. Muller and I, through the last few years, have handled this and basically said, we don't, your company that you're going to be homeschooled through isn't accredited by our school board. And on top of that, if it was, then we have to do grading checks. Each kid has to be passing 5 classes per semester, or per week per semester. So at the high school, I'm guessing this new policy does not apply to that, because our policy still does not adhere to, we haven't said, hey, we're going to accredit this company, we're going to accredit this company, this company, this company for homeschool kids. So we have not allowed homeschool kids to participate in athletics. Now in some of the, I don't know specifics, but like some clubs or activities and things like that, we may have allowed them to come in after school to work to work with those groups.
Clubs that don't fall under the IHSA. So if it's not
Well, how do
competitive.
they get into, say, you're homeschooled, you're homeschooled to, say, 6th grade or whatever, 8th grade, let's just say. Say all of a sudden you're homeschooled to 8th grade. How do we accredit them to coming into, say, 9th grade or 7th grade or whatever?
You don't accrue credits at the middle school. You're promoted just throughout social promotion. Its credits are earned at the 9th grade level and beyond. And it's because we can guarantee that the students are learning to the certain standard that they're supposed to be learning because of the curriculum alignment that we do.
I can see how that would happen.
We can't guarantee that it's happening in a homeschool.
Do they test? Do they test in it? I mean, pardon me for getting diverted here, but in other words, if we accept them coming in at a certain level, do we test them?
We would do the test. We would place them accordingly into whatever math they happen to fall into, but they still, if they're coming from the homeschool, they have to earn the credits that a student would have to earn.
And do we have anybody in town that does that?
When parents reach out to me, and then especially in the role that I had previous to this role in academic programming, my advice was, if you're gonna go homeschool, you have to stick with it, because there are plenty of secondary, post-secondary institutions that work with homeschool credits. High schools, it just gets very finicky because we have to be held accountable to the State Board of Ed whenever we certify somebody earns a diploma. So we have to verify those credits.
So what I'm saying is,
the older the kids get, the harder it is to transfer as a homeschool student. If you come in as a 9th grader, it's not that hard. If you come in as a 10th grader, there's time to work your way through. If you come in as 11th grader, it's very difficult to graduate by the time that you're 18.
Right.
So
we have standards that we hold homeschool to.
Correct.
As they transfer in, and you're saying the same standards apply for them.
We have to,
athletes in the
when it goes to, let's just take an example of something that goes to state competition. We are held accountable as a school to ensure that the students are academically qualified to participate. I mean, they have to have passed at least 5 classes the year before, and they have to be currently passing 5 classes. Now, from a high school's perspective, we do not recognize the classes that they've taken before. So from our perspective, they haven't passed anything. Also, we can't guarantee that the student is currently passing the class, because we can't, think about all the checks and balances we require our teachers to go through. We can guarantee, and the supports that we provide for teachers, we can guarantee that those kids are passing the classes because those are our teachers certifying that. Somebody coming from a homeschool, we can't guarantee that. So, and let me play devil's advocate here. If you have a student who's not being academically successful, a coach with ill intent, which we don't have any, I'll put that out there, but a coach with ill intent could, in theory, then say, why don't you transfer to homeschool for the season? We can guarantee that you're going to pay, and it's our star quarterback, so to speak, and Wecklers wouldn't do this, but this could happen, where that student is then able to participate, and then
because they're not meeting
academic needs, but they're being qualified by a homeschool. It's a slippery, and in my opinion, it is a slippery slope.
It's more complicated than I was looking at.
That's for the high school level.
Right.
And also, right, Jake or Nick? So if the homeschool kid comes in, freshman, So basically, it's like a new student.
Right.
So with not having the 5 passing classes prior, so would that keep him from going out for football?
No,
Would he be eligible, yes or no?
he'd be eligible. All incoming freshmen start on a new slate. So we've had this in all school districts have had this. You may have an incoming freshman that has failed multiple classes and they get promoted to high school. So all incoming freshmen first semester are a clean slate. Your eligibility starts day one we start school.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Well, I can see how that would get complicated as far as the dropping somebody out, putting him in homeschool and saying, okay, now you can play, right? I mean, that would be awkward. But I do feel like, that the other people that are schooling at home pardon me, but is there a way that we can coordinate with homeschool to say, look, there are 3 different programs you can be under to be dovetailing with us? I mean, working at a level that is then your 3rd grade, your 4th grade, your 5th grade. Are there programs out there that try to dovetail with
There are
schools?
certainly programs out there, and before we would go down that road, we would want to vet those programs.
Right.
That's something I'd want to coordinate with Jenny's office on to make sure that they were meeting the standards that we hold them to. And they would go before curriculum council. So, yes.
It would seem to me that would be good for us in general in DeKalb, and say it in sense of saying, we can't just throw people out to homeschool and say, hey, do whatever you do. I mean, go ahead,
But if homeschool is the right option for a family and we had time to vet the program, in theory, sure. But, I think with what Nick was saying here, as far as the slippery slope in approving what was proposed, I'm a little hesitant, but that's just my opinion.
Okay, yeah, we're kind of sliding off topic here.
Sorry.
Well, I think let's do is let's go back to cabinet and have a further discussion about this, about what has come up tonight, and we'll move forward from there. Bringing it back is something that's informational and quick.
Okay, the second sentence in the highlighted part is somewhat bothersome to me, the more that I think about it here. However, District 420 officials recognize participation in extracurricular activities is not a material or property right, rather a privilege. I'm not so sure I agree with that, now that I'm thinking about this.
But the cabinet.
Back to the taxes, back to the property taxes. Yeah, so I think we have more to do
We do.
before we can pass something like this.
Correct. You feel the same way?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So that's what we'll do, we'll go back to cabinet and have some more discussion. Next, we have vision and hearing screenings for 2017-18. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the DeKalb County Health Department's agreement to collaboratively assist with vision and hearing screenings for our district students for the 2017-2018 school year. Do we have a motion?
Second.
Any discussion?
I will be abstaining just because I'm employed through the district. I mean, through the health department, not this district.
Roll call, please.
Howard Salvin,
Yes.
Fred Davis,
Yes.
Yes.
Mayor Millat,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez.
And with that, the meeting will be adjourned. All in favor?
Aye.